So I'm Phil, I'm Analytics Director and Founder at MeasureMinds. So we do Google Analytics GTM server-side and BigQuery for large enterprises. I've also got a little kind of Tag Manager guide on Amazon. If you send me an email, I can send you a free copy of that guidebook. And we've got a number of apps that we built on Google Tag Manager and on the GA4 Management API. Some of those I'm going to mention at the end of these slides. Quick sort of fun fact about myself. So my wife is actually Colombian. So we met in New York, and over the course of COVID, we've been building a house in Colombia. Here's a little picture of it there. So if my analytics career goes completely pear-shaped, don't worry, I've got a fallback career I can use or rely on. Yes, I can become a Colombian drug lord. Uh, Thankfully, analytics is going okay at the moment, so we'll stick to the plan. But the plan for today is just going to cover some terminology elements of what is consent mode, and then we're going to go through these 10 mistakes to avoid. Right, let's get going. So with the 10 mistakes, there is a cheat sheet, and you can mark your score out of 10. Maybe you want to kind of take a photo of this list or download the slides. You can get access to the slides by filling the feedback form, which is at the end of this, and there you'll have the cheat sheet. I just need to cover what is consent mode modeling. So that's really taking the 80%-ish of users that have been tracked and then upscaling the users that haven't been tracked. So the 20% of declines, that's to get back up to the 100% to allow for reliable kind of benchmarking or a fair comparison over time. The reason it's needed is there's been an increase in opt-outs over time because more sites are using cookie banners, there's more user awareness, and sometimes it's just easier to opt out. So, and you can actually see that if you compare your count of Google ad clicks versus your Google CPC sessions. Here we've got 100 clicks and 85 CPC sessions. And that's really where it's taking the modeling and kind of upscaling it to get it close to the 100%. You could even run that comparison on Looker Studio and you can see that kind of rough difference. The other reason is changes in the operating system. So here, when iOS 14 was released, Facebook was forced to change from a out mode to an opt-in mode, and that had a massive effect on data quality and like a 90% reduction in the amount of data and traffic they were collecting. Same also applies with the ICO when they did a methodology change and they changed their banner to an opt-in mode from opt-out. And again, a massive step change, not great for comparisons. So when we talk about modeling, we're really talking about getting that comparison back to where it was to allow for month on month and year on year, and looking at performance of channels and campaigns, etc. So when you hear modeling, just think upscaling. That's really all it is. Just one pet peeve. I love Google, but they are absolutely terrible at naming stuff. I don't know what's going on with the in-house branding team, but it's crazy. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The Google tag really is just like simple TMS mode. Modeling, yeah, that's just upscaling. If you say to someone, do you want to turn on modeling? They're like, I'm not sure. But if you say, do you want to turn on upscaling? They're like, yes, please. Advanced mode, well, that's really just modeling active. And don't get me started on conversions, renamed key events, and all that craziness. Basically, Google, please just keep things simple. Don't confuse users by picking crazy names for stuff. The other thing with consent mode V1 versus V2, I'll just quickly cover what the difference between those is. You can see these two new fields here that have been added as a result of Digital Marketing Act from 7th of May. What that meant is the CMPs officially had to add these two new fields as options in their banner, and they had to add it into the back end of the CMPs to allow the CMP system to connect with the banner and for brands to control those banners. The problem is with the GTM templates, which most of these CMPs are using, it's quite difficult to push out a change to add new fields. And in this case here, Simo pushed out a change to his template and it caused a breaking change, which obviously not good for like paying users if they're using these CMPs. So obviously the CMPs had to weigh up the options of either possibly rolling out a breaking change or just mapping the existing add storage field to these two new fields. So you can kind of guess what they did. Yeah, absolutely nothing. So they just mapped the two new fields to add storage. So really, when you talk about consent mode v1 versus v2, really nothing has changed between the two. With one exception, you do need to update your community templates to make sure that they have the two new fields. So if these templates haven't been updated for the last 10 months, they may be missing them. So you just click the update and deploy to refresh that. When we talk about basic mode and advanced mode, basic mode is kind of using industry benchmarks for upscaling. Normally it's going to be less conversions that are upscaled and less conversions that are like modeled. The same with sessions. Advanced mode, it's using data from your site and the deny pings to upscale the data. So here you see the blended and then modeling potentially active. Advanced mode, I would say, generally means that you're going to get more data modeled and the numbers are going to look better. So why would you not want to use advanced mode? Bit of a crazy question. Why would you want less conversions? Generally, there are some reasons why you can't use advanced mode. I just need to quickly cover those. If your in-house DPO, this is the man from the DPO, Monty here, if he says, can you use advanced mode? And he says, no. Unfortunately, if you get your in-house DPO doesn't allow you to use it, and obviously you're restricted, unfortunately. You can in GTM, you can set the fields for Google tags to actually add the extra field, and then you stop consent mode ping. So later it makes it easier to switch to advanced mode should you need to. And actually in our consent mode monitor tool, you can select basic mode in the scan to see that. Also, if you're in one of these countries in red where Google Analytics has been marked illegal, that you're restricted there. Hopefully in January, Google will or Chrome will introduce IP anonymization, so that gets around some of these objections from these countries. Also, you can use GTM server side, remove IP addresses on server side, and then that also makes it more compliant, and then more likely you're able to kind of use Google Analytics 4 or less likely to get into problems with it. With California, it's a bit of a grey area whether IP addresses are allowed in California. And whether they're used, they're definitely not allowed if they're used for the sale or targeting, although consent mode pings are not used for targeting, or at least that's what Google says. So there's no case law on that one, but just one to be aware of. Or if it's a very small site and you don't have enough traffic to trigger modeling, that would be another reason you'd have to use basic mode. So assuming you have enough traffic and your DPO says yes, then you can use advanced mode. Woohoo! So what does that mean? Well, you get the power to turn on upscaling, but you think something so powerful, how could there be so many ways that you could break it? There are. So this really is a list of these mistakes, and just really be careful. First one, I've mentioned some of those templates earlier, be it cookiebot, user-centrics, etc. Templates. Templates are much better. They allow you to less likely you're going to break a template rather than editing custom HTML. They're easier for marketers to manage and maintain. So here's an example. This is our cookiebot template. We've got one in modal mode and one in container mode. This is a recipe that contains the cookiebot template within it. So that's the cookiebot template, and then we've got a couple other custom JavaScript bits of code that we use to just tweak it slightly, like remove the cookiebot logo, make sure it runs on any domains that might be missed from the subdomain list, and also render the cookiebot table on a page if the div is not present there. With the other reason, the risk of if you don't use a template and you're just using custom HTML to deploy those banners, then you may not have those two new fields present, and thus you'll have knock-on effects for conversions and remarketing that potentially gets disabled. And in fact, Google's encouraging new setups to use GTM template. So here's the interface from Google Ads, where if you jump from Google Ads over to the Google tag settings, it says set up consent mode, and it goes off to create an account, in this case on User-Centrics, and add a GTM template at the same time. So all within like Google's tool. So even Google's kind of encouraging the usage of those templates or community templates here. So another common mistake is using AutoBlock. Please don't use AutoBlock. So AutoBlock is a technology for classifying JavaScript files and the cookies that those files set. It does it in bulk, and it's easy to kind of turn on and off, but it's really bad for site speed, and it stops these consent mode pings from working. So if you want to use advanced mode, you can't use AutoBlock. Also, it's not great if it hasn't scanned a site, and it's just a better way to do it is using the consent mode categories. It's much cleaner and better for JavaScript execution. If you see autoblock.js on the site, that probably means you're using AutoBlock. It is possible to deploy it in empty mode, so you can actually kind of turn it off and then switch to consent mode categories. But yeah, generally try and not use that if you can. The other common mistake is mixing the legacy blocking rules with the consent mode categories. So here we've got the native consent mode categories here. These are fired on a consent updated, and then we've got the reject analytics blocking mode legacy method here. So this would stop the consent mode pings being sent. So obviously you'd have to remove that in order for it to work as expected. Another really common mistake is using the wrong name. Quite commonly here, this is using an example of OneTrust here. A tag might be firing on all pages when actually it needs to be fired after the CMP has read the cookies and there's been a consent updated event. The same is there's actually two events in OneTrust, one called OneTrust Updated, another one called OneTrust Loaded. It's actually the OneTrust Updated is the right one to use. There's not a standard event name that GTM forces, unfortunately. So each CMP have picked a different name for a consent updated. Here we've got CookieBot, OneTrust, Cookie Scripts, etc. Doesn't help with standardization. I mean, Tag Rocket have got a good script example where they look for changes in the 7 categories and then they send an event, but it's using polling and it's not ideal. It really would be best if Google just forces both standard names for built-in consent fields and a standard event name for consent, but they don't at the moment. So you're going to have to use lots of different ones for each CMP, and it makes it harder to change CMPs, which is not ideal. Another mistake is not enabling the default consent. So you have to have the default declared before an update, otherwise it just doesn't work. Or if you've forgotten to even add the default to the site, it would also kind of not work. So it needs to be default, normally set in the header, sometimes outside of GTM, then the update. If you got them the wrong way around, you'll see this warning in GTM preview mode, and also the GTM tag diagnostic may also flag a warning in terms of GTag load order. Also remember, if using certain CMPs, you actually have to not just turn on the template and tick the box for consent mode in the TMS, in the GTM template, you also have to turn it on in the TMS as well. This is OneTrust here, so you have to turn it on in 2 places, not just one. There's actually now 2 ways to set a default tag in for GTM and consent mode. So the old way is the defaults consent here, so as storage, analytics storage, user data, etc. And as I said, that could either be in your global header or the CMP template could be setting that. There's a newer way, which has only been available for the last kind of month or so, which is in the GA4 tag, in the Google tag, you can actually now also specify defaults, and you can set IP regions in here. My suggestion is not to use this new method. The reason for it is it doesn't account for race conditions. So let's say you got a Facebook tag and that fires before the Google tag, then it's kind of a horses bolted problem. So it's really dangerous using this. also it doesn't support legal jurisdictions. You can't say I want like EU or EU community, European Economic Community. It just literally has a list of Europe and individually selects countries. So like if you're trying to select, let's say the UK inside or outside the EU, you can't really, it'd be nice if they did legal jurisdictions, but they don't. So yeah, generally don't use that feature. It's bad. Another mistake, again, I'm kind of picking on OneTrust here a bit, but they ask in their template, do you want to turn on the defaults? So for instance, you want to use consent mode modeling, you want to use ad storage, and you want the default to be enabled, right? Makes sense? Nope. They ask it in a bit of a funny way. So they say, here's analytic storage here. You want to activate it, so you want to turn it on. Do you think that'd be right? But it's not. It actually, on in this instance means granted. What actually you want is off by default. So you want a deny. It'd make more sense if they just called it deny and granted in this list here rather than on and off, but it's kind of like a double negative and slightly confusing. So just be careful about that other issue to be aware of. Another one, which is really common, is getting the GeoIP list the wrong way around. So here we've got the EU list down here, but the default is set above it. So this doesn't work because the default kicks in first before the individual countries. It has to be that way around to work properly. A little bit like a robot.txt, kind of allow and disallow. It has to be disallow first, then allow. So jumping back to basic mode for a moment, the industry category you select for basic mode is really important. So here we've got business and industry. It uses that data from all sites to work out what an average conversion rate and average upscaling should be for sessions. So here's some data from WordStream for average conversion rates, and you can see that business and industry here is on about 5% conversion rate, whereas other business industry categories is on maybe about 7%-ish rate there. So you can get maybe a 2% jump in your upscaled conversion rate by selecting a different category. So in this case, if someone actually switched from business and industry to other business services, the results would look better. Obviously, you'd have to tell the client about that change because it's a kind of moving the goalpost thing. So I would advise caution about doing it. But I'm telling you just so that if someone does it to you or the wrong category is selected, maybe you picked a category where it's too low, then you do correct the issue. Be careful about the healthcare category because when you select that, it disables GA4 remarketing. So here's an example here where shopping is actually a 3% conversion rate. So if it was changed to, let's say, business and industry shopping, then actually it jumps by 4%. So even a larger shift caused by the kind of basic mode benchmarking. So Google has categorized Google tags automatically. So here we've got Google Analytics 4 or Google Ads. They're all good. So Google's trying to protect itself from a 10% of global revenue fine. So hence why it's covered its own back. What it hasn't done is it hasn't covered Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, other gatekeepers. So they're down to you to actually set and make sure you're compliant. Really common one is LinkedIn as well, which always seems to be missed in terms of categorization. So you need to make sure these are marked in the right category, otherwise they're going to fire outside of consent and you're going to have problems. Google's also got a slight issue where they've forgotten to mark call tracking as a native sort of field for consent. Maybe this because Google may introduce a consent mode modeling for phone call conversions at some point. It hasn't rolled out yet. This is possibly why it's got forgotten, but watch this space on that one. Another coming to the end now, but remember to turn on Bing consent mode modeling. It's so easy to activate and it's going to make the numbers look better. It's just going into your native Bing page view tag and ticking these two boxes, making sure you trigger it at the right time on consent updated, and then your jobs are good and you're going to have more conversions counted in Bing. Lastly, make sure you validate your tags are working. So here we've got the GTM preview mode. and checking that a default and an update are working in the right order and it's as expected. Also, this is in the GA4 interface. You see we've got a warning here about ad personalization. It hasn't been turned on, and this could be either on the apps or website. So remember to check this. Lastly, we've got a free tool which can scan your website. It doesn't need authentication to scan, and you can either enter your domain name, or if it's blocked via Cloudflare or a kind of an anti-bot kind of scanner, you can enter your GTM account ID there. There's a demo ID there, that one down there, if you want to just try it and see what it finds, or just click on Zara.com as an example. We've actually also got a new version of this tool that's rolled out. So after it's done a free scan, you can actually go in and click a one-click fix button to correct any tags that are missing consent, like let's say a LinkedIn tag or a Facebook tag. So we're rolling this out as of today. So exciting. So it's $99 per month for unlimited number of domains and unlimited number of scans. That's a 30-day rolling contract. So if you really want, you could go in and just fix a bunch of sites. Let's say you're an agency, cancel it after a month. That's up to you. There's no like strings attached sort of thing. Although if you want to continuous monitoring to make sure there's not a compliance issue, then you might need that ongoing kind of rolling $99. But if you use the voucher code GTM forward, you get 30% off, so it's $66 per month. And just love to get feedback on the tool, especially on the fix button. It will create a GTM a workspace. It doesn't push the changes out. You actually have to go in GTM and click publish. We've done that intentionally just to make sure that you can sanity check them. Be great to get feedback on it. Just one minor note, it will scan through all of the, or you can click to scan through all of the tags in an account. The GTM API though is painfully slow. So if it does load slowly, that's not us, that's Google. That's because the thresholds on the GTM API are 15 requests per minute, which is ridiculously slow. And I've been chasing for the last 5 months to get it increased, and no movement on that. So Google, please increase the API thresholds. What happens if you get consent mode wrong? Obviously, as a brand, you're at risk of a 4% global revenue fine. It's actually, in America, it's getting really interesting. It's actually 5K per user in California. And so it's not just about PR damage and a Google Ads account being affected and remarketing being paused or underbidding or underreporting. It actually has a financial impact for getting this wrong. And I'll link to in a moment a chart for some of these legal jurisdictions and changes. There's lots of individual states that are starting to roll out laws in America at the moment. And obviously there may be some changes in the UK regarding consent for small and medium-sized businesses, but let's kind of watch this space on that one. It is in the US, though, it's becoming commercialized, a bit like parking wardens. They just go after sites because it's civil actions, and these class action lawyers make money from it. So it's different to Europe, where it's just regulators enforcing and the regulators make money. In America, it's kind of greedy lawyers that are incentivized and motivated. So be careful if you operate in California and you have more than 25 million in global revenue in the US, because there is an unlimited fine if it ever went to court as a class action. Here's an example. This is actually an FTC fine of 1.2 million for having a Facebook tag loaded outside of consent and not having a do not sell footer link and a non-working opt-out. So be careful if you're in America. It's make sure you don't get it wrong, especially with your targeting tags. So here's the summary of the scores on the doors. So if you want to put in chat how you scored, did you get 10 out of 10? Did you get 2 out of 10? Did you get 8 out of 10? I would love to know how many you got right and how many you got wrong. Did anyone get 10 out of 10? No? Okay, I don't need to become a Colombian drug lord just now. I'll stick to analytics. Phew. All right. Okay, if you did get maybe 2 or 3 out of 10, feel free to reach out or try out our consent mode monitor tool so you can automatically fix those issues. And also, I'd love to get your feedback on both this talk and the app. I'll just put that link into chat now. And please fill in the feedback form on Google Forms, and then on the thank you page, you'll get access to the slides and some other material.